Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode, another week of The GoalLink Show. My name is Ben. I am your host and the founder of GoalLink, which is a goal-setting community that we provide growth junkies with weekly challenges to avoid complacency. So if you're looking to grow and develop on a consistent basis, then you're in the right place. These challenges are inspired by different brands to bring you new ways to improve yourself. So you can kick back and watch me take on these challenges, or you can join me. I challenge every listener out there to complete these weekly goals. Catch the content on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at GoalLink Group. The GoalLink Show, this podcast recounts experiences from the achievers of the world, but not just the success. We delve into the challenges and the struggle that we all face. How do we find the will to push through? What role do motivation, discipline, and failure play in our lives? Let's talk about the process, the nitty-gritty, the falls, the rises, everything in between, and not just the result. We discuss this and much more on the show. Thanks for tuning in. This week is a dope episode. Get ready. Welcome Brionna Morse, a self-mastery coach, to the show. This is a must-listen for every achiever, overachiever, and just plain doer out there. Anyone who likes to accomplish tasks, do, go. We delve into why what we do and what we have does not define us. This is huge. Big. I love it. And Brionna went from studying psychology to teaching to a residential treatment center for teen males. She earned her intern hours and then started her own therapy practice. 10 years later, she decided to make a change, packed up her life from Ventura, California, and moved to Greenville, South Carolina. And we talk about, her struggles over the past year and what she's learned. And that's the thing, like these coaches and therapists that you have, we all struggle. And it's so cool to talk about that openly because we all have those struggles, man. So some other nuggets that we describe or that we talk about is why fear is a teacher, how compassion, humility, and forgiveness lead her life, why by being by yourself, having alone time, and meditating is so important, and overcoming the fear of asking for help. Let's get into it. This is awesome. Let's go. All right, everyone, welcome to the GoalLink Show. This is I guess we're filming with my phone, and it's currently on 3 pillows on a backpack. So we miss Andre right now without a solution. But Brionna, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
And we're filming early-ish on a Thursday morning. And to me, it's fun. And I appreciate you being here at this time. And with downtown Greenville behind us. So you are a self-mastery coach. And we were just talking about the kinds of people that you coach. Mm-hmm. Do you mind going into... Well, first off, how did you get into this? Because I know you were into more of like the therapy realm before this, and I find that fascinating. So let's start there.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. I'm very honored. I love the opportunity to share my story and my passion and purpose with other people. There's a huge spider right there crawling on the thing. Sorry, an aside.
Good thing we didn't use that table.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I probably would have jumped off.
Yeah, I think it's pretty freaky.
So thank you. I feel super humbled. So I started out, it's funny. I think that we all have an ideal track, air quotes, if you think about where you see yourself going.
Yeah.
And I was always a natural helper, and I found a place to superimpose myself in some sort of helping way, whether it was like babysitting or doing extra stuff when I went
Just
to a church, growing up, everything.
Is your Enneagram type 2?
No, I'm actually a 6.
What is that?
6 is someone who's kind of in their head and likes to overanalyze and think through things and has this emotional connection to wanting to give of themselves in order to make other people feel good.
So that's similar.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, which is so funny that you said that, because in my own personal coaching, I'm at a place where my coach had me take the Enneagram again, which I landed at a 6 again. And have you heard of, I'm going to botch who they are. Actually, I'm going to pull it up because I'm listening to it right now. So there's a band called Sleeping at Last. He's a musician.
Okay.
And he created a song per every
That's
Enneagram.
sick.
So Sleeping at Last, so you can
out.
YouTube it, and he'll have a video per Enneagram, and then he has a podcast per Enneagram, and he has a specialist that is well known in the Enneagram world that explains your number, and then he goes into explaining how he created the song.
That's really cool.
I'm listening to that right now, which is really cool.
So you were a helper.
So I'm a helper, and I went to college as I'm going to do psychology. I'm going to be in the psychology world. I want to be a therapist. I know I'll be great at it. And I almost failed Psych 101 and decided, screw this. I'm obviously not good at what I'm doing because I can't even pass a class, so I'm going to go into teaching. I finished undergrad with a liberal studies degree to teach, started the credential program, and quickly realized I am not fit to follow standards, which is what teachers teach to. I have a very creative mind, and I like to think from an individual perspective, and I like to approach things from an individual's experience, because not everybody...
Instead of like a cookie cutter approach.
Exactly.
One size fits all.
Yeah, well, because you and I both know, like, your learning curve is different from my learning curve. You connect with things different from what I connect with, and how you're living affects how you learn. So we all have a different way of, getting fed information and keeping that in. So at the time I was working at a residential treatment center. I was the only female working in a boys 11 to 18.
And this was in California? And how old were you?
In California. So I was 21.
That's crazy. So 21, and you were essentially being a therapist for 11 to 18-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so young.
Oh, yeah.
To be doing that. That's
and
wild.
Listen, the natural helper in me was like, I'm going to get all these boys to love me. I'm going to do everything for them. I'm going to caretake them. Because, these kids have been through hell. Like, locked up in cages for their life, abused and neglected.
Like, literally, though, locked up in cages.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes. Like, I could tell you stories upon stories that kids being burnt with cigarettes. Like, it's terrible. So, obviously, they all have behavioral issues.
Yeah.
And I soon realized how much I loved providing hope and care for especially kids that had no hope and didn't feel like they had anybody they could trust. Like, their environment sucked to them. So I went back and got my master's in psychology, ended up getting my license in marriage and family therapy. That's the license that California gives. I think here in South Carolina it's like a licensed professional counselor, LPC, or something like that. And so, I went through earning my intern hours and then started a private practice. I specialized in attachment work, so I worked with a lot of families who were adopting kids from overseas. I saw a lot of kids, adolescents, teens with major depression, major anxiety, and then a good chunk of like college-age youth. Because as you know, like transitioning from living with your parents and having all these rules to then going into college and being independent and then having to figure out, like, what does my life look like now that I'm done? Like, all of that is overwhelming.
It is.
And we make a lot of terrible decisions.
That's cool. So how did people, how did recent graduated college students find you? Because to me, as a 22-year-old, I wouldn't be thinking, I need help.
Yeah.
Or I need guidance. You're like, all right, I'm excited to do this thing out in the world.
Yeah. I think I built a really good reputation in in Ventura, which is where I'm from. Ventura is very similar to Greenville in that it's a pretty small community, and once you've got a good reputation and a good name, referring and people being sent to you is fairly easy.
Cool.
So that part I'm very grateful for. And I did some speaking engagements and stuff like that at some of the colleges. So I think I just developed a good reputation, which is so important. It's so important. So then I got divorced. This was 3 years ago. And I wanted to start my life over. I had this epiphany of I had kept myself in some ways trapped, not speaking up, not living to my full potential, not doing things that inside my gut, I felt like I was really being called to want to do.
And at this time, you were still a therapist.
I was still a therapist.
Yeah. Right. So 3-ish years ago, you were a therapist, and then divorced, and then you are thinking like it doesn't matter if you're some master coach or whatever. You can still potentially not. You can still feel empty or not fulfilled.
No, yeah, and I wasn't even thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a therapist, and now I'm going to move and be a coach. Like, and I was still going to do therapy wherever I went, and everything was going to look the same way, but I was going to feel more free and have this new life to start. So I moved to South Carolina.
So how did you? I'm just popping questions as we go. So how did you find Greenville, South Carolina?
I had met someone online, and I came out to visit and really fell in love with, so where I lived in California, Ventura, California is right on the beach. So where I lived was like 10 minutes off the beach, actually like right outside of strawberry and cilantro fields. So could you imagine driving through that every day home? It was like luxury.
That sounds that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. So coming out here, I fell in love with the greenery and being a part of nature and the hiking and the waterfalls. I mean, California is in a drought 24/7. There's no water anywhere except for the ocean. So for me to be out here and see how luscious everything is, and that there's this massive, infinite amount of water, I was like, gosh, this place is so pretty, And it was very different from everything that I knew, and I didn't know anybody. And I just had this draw to like, go do it on your own. Like, figure it out on your own. When we're in a place of suffering or loss or struggle, although it's good to have a support network that we can lean on to process things or get us out of our slump, I think sometimes we tend to use that and avoid really processing internal work.
I will agree. I'll keep going, because I think I really connect with you for this reason, because you decided to go somewhere on your own where you knew one person, but not really.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a huge, and has been a huge thing. So, so you came out here.
So I came out here. Well, actually, it was actually literally 7 days before I was moving, so I'd already packed and shipped. My stuff was being transported out here. I had put a down payment on a place to live. My friend from San Diego was coming up. We were driving out here, got the hotel set up.
You drove?
Everything. Oh, drove. 26 hours with 2 dogs and me and a packed car and my friend.
Oh,
it was
man.
the best.
That's fun.
It was so fun. So fun.
Yeah.
I got a letter from the board of South Carolina denying me a license. They said that my license didn't configure to their expectation.
This was on the way or a week before you left?
It was a week before I was leaving.
Okay.
Which is bullcrap, because California is like the strictest state when it comes to licensing, and I had to do 20,000 more things than here. But again, it was all part of my process of growth. So I said, screw it. I'm still going to come out here. I'll figure the rest out later. So moved to Clemson because of my experience with the college-age youth. I thought that would be a great place for me to go, and it was. I didn't work as much as I think set an expectation for myself. But what I learned during that time was that I actually was gifted like a sabbatical. I had an emotional year of processing and healing, and actually like unpeeling several layers of my internal onion that I had been kind of living off of, thinking that like I was functioning great. And I think that's a piece of it, is until we get really honest and reflective with areas that keep showing up for us that we're not even aware of, like it's going to keep showing up for us until we finally become aware of it and realize, holy crap, I've been living this life, but I'm not fulfilled all the way, and I don't feel happy all the time, and I don't feel proud, and I'm not living in my purpose.
What do you think? So I thought this. So before I moved to South Carolina 5 months ago, I thought I knew myself, and I thought I loved myself. And like truly, like I really thought I did. I thought I was like on my way to like fulfillment and purpose, Do you think that someone who feels maybe they think that they're fulfilled, or like let's say like you're the Tony Robbins of like fulfillment and purpose, do you feel like you should totally like question that and flip it to truly see if you are?
I think what everyone needs to do, because like you, I was in the same boat. Like, I felt super confident, and I felt like I, was, that idea of self-love and self-care I was doing, and I was going to the gym, I was eating healthy, I was, like maintaining friendships back in California. But at the same time, I was isolating myself here. I was constantly beating myself up about things. I was putting myself into like really yucky and gross situations where I was behaving in a way that doesn't align with who I am. And yet I would do it over and over again and still see it happening. But then I would say I was happy. So I think that what I would encourage, because I'm not going to say should, because there's no rules, but what I encourage people to do is really assess their self-love and their happiness based on who they are and who they're showing up as versus what they actually do.
I like
and
that.
What they have surrounding them.
Will you repeat that? Because I think that's so critical for people to hear. It's
about who you are and who you're showing up as versus what you have and what you're doing. So it's about really looking at your core being. And for me, I'm still in that learning process. And like I said, and it's funny, like I have done everything under the sun. I have done EMT, which is like an emotional, it's like you tap into your emotions from this different way. It's very woo-woo. I've done Reiki. I've done traditional therapy. I mean, my first therapist was 84 years old. She was so cool because she was like, did not give a crap about anything. So she held me accountable, but was very nurturing, right? I've had a specific relationship coach, and the coach that I have now, I hired for my business. But in fact, when we look at healing one area of our life, it's typically going across the board, whether it's finances, relationships, your career, your spiritual life. Like, we typically don't have a quote unquote problem area in just one spot. It exists in other areas. It's just we're more successful at overcompensating in these other spaces.
That's so interesting. So I think, man, this is actually a really fascinating subject I'm probably going to meditate more on. Like, something that we're doing, I think we think defines us. Or, so let's just use the example, like we're successful at work, right? Like for me, just to be like completely honest, like 28 years old, I'm not like a millionaire, uber rich by any means, if that's what you define as successful.
But you are paying a crap amount for your apartment, let's be honest.
Yes, I pay. Like, I'm doing well, right? And, but however, like, I'll admit, like, being a director at a finance company isn't my ultimate fulfillment. Like, that's like, even saying that feels good. Like, I haven't really said that out loud, like, to anyone, besides my mom. Over the phone.
Hey, Mom, we're on the same page.
But like, truly, it's something that I'm doing, and someone can look from the outside, which I've had people say, wow, Ben, you're a director by 28, you're doing well, like, you moved out to this, like, this company recruited you, blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, like, I'm happy I did it, and I think it's a stepping stone. Like, it's an amazing company. I'm not saying like I hate it by any means, but like, if you dig deep down, like, am I like living in my ultimate purpose and fulfillment? No.
Well, and what I would encourage you to look at, and your listeners to look at, if they're aligned in the same sort of way as you, is it's a twofold. You have to know what your gift is, like what you've been put on this earth for. Typically, that comes from your defining moment. Most people's defining moment is like a rock bottom, super hard, painful experience. When you can identify your gift, then you start to align with your purpose, because whatever it is you're supposed to be doing is based on what you're going to be giving to other people.
I like that.
And when you can serve in some way that aligns with who you are and what you're supposed to be doing, then financially and emotionally and mentally, like, everything else falls into place.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And do you feel like, because so much of my life I felt like I've been trying to get things and achieve things that I want, that I think that like I'm getting by my own will. And I think there's an aspect of that, but what I've been learning lately is like my gifts are not necessarily something I've created. Like I've worked on them, yes, to like illuminate them, I'll say, I guess. But like I haven't, like they're natural. So how much, like, what are your thoughts on forcing something versus really like, what if you don't even like a gift? You know, like, because some people might be good at something, but they don't, or they're scared of it maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think you just hit on the word, the fear of actually taking a risk that feels super out of what you know is familiar. You know, I mean, we're programmed to live in this part of our brain. You know, in the therapy world, we call it our ego. You can call it your limiting beliefs. You can, you know, I've got clients who call it their saboteur. Like that, we all like identify it however we are. But we have this part of our brain that has been programmed to keep us feeling fearful of going past what we know, because in our lives we'll experience something traumatic or negative, or, you know, it's a conditioning that we get from our parents or teachers or, you know, our peers. And over time, those start to build calluses that keep us hardened from wanting to put ourselves out there. Because if we do and it doesn't work, then that ego gets reinforced by saying, see, I told you you suck, you're not good enough, told you that you can't be successful, like why would you even do that? Like you already know that that's not what you're good at. And so it tries to convince you to stay exactly where you are. And so, you know, the work that I do with my clients, and I do it in my own personal life, is really learning to understand where that voice is actually coming from and what the fear is there for. Like, what is it trying to teach you? Like, why is it afraid? Because when you can get to know yourself, which is such a huge part of going back to that self-love, then you can navigate that voice a little bit more successfully without getting stopped or not taking that risk or taking that step.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Like, you talked a lot about how you personally have coaches, right? And I think that's a huge thing, is that any great coach out there should have their own team. Yeah. You know, of like, if you're going to teach it, you got to live it. Yep. Right?
Yeah.
So, and I've listened to a lot of things, and I can attest that you are like, you make your living this way. So obviously like you're legitimate, and like, look, you just smiled, like you truly love it, which is awesome. But I think a lot of it can just be like expelling what we think people should do, like on podcasts. Do you have something, like you just mentioned that you do the work yourself, and I know there's a lot of work that you've done in the past year. So what is something that you've done the work on and challenges you've overcome in the last year?
Gosh, let's see. I mean, it's a long list. You know, but for me, it goes down. It comes down to 3 words that have accumulated over the last year that I continue to go back to with it, which is compassion, humility, and forgiveness. Compassion, and this is towards myself, towards my environment, and towards the relationships that I continue to have lost, you know, have struggled with, you know, whatever. And I think that those 3 words or 2 words or 1 word may be different for everyone else, but for me, this last year has been about being more compassionate, which for me means just slowing down and being more connected to my emotions. Like, I'm a fast-paced person, and I typically move through things. I used to, and we were talking about this off mic, but you know, I used to use the gym for what I thought was this healthy piece of me, because I'm super into health and wellness. I love the idea of being strong. I love the idea of you know, giving your body what it needs. But the gym for me started to become an escape, and I could use my adrenaline as a way to avoid all of the softer feelings, because I could just keep that burning feeling in my body and not have to really connect to like the sadness or the disappointment or the grief or whatever it was. And so I really learned to be compassionate. The humility piece for me, you know, over this last year, every expectation that I had in moving out here did not work out. Like, I literally, not one thing that I had expected and envisioned for my life turned out the way that I was, for a fact, confident it was going to be like. But I'm so grateful for every loss, everything that didn't work, because it brought me to this current space that I'm in, where I had to start thinking outside the box and get creative, and I had to be more flexible with how I viewed relationships and how I viewed myself in relationships, and I had to be more flexible about ways of putting myself out there and like who I identify as. And then the forgiveness piece, which I think is huge for everyone, is I had to start making amends, and not only with people that I held grudges against in the past, but most importantly myself. And I didn't realize how many grudges I had against myself because of the expectations and the perfectionistic thinking and the overachieving ideals that I've had since I can remember. And so those 3 words have kind of been an ongoing process for me of looking at, like, where can I be more compassionate with myself? Where do I get to be grateful for the you know, the humble experience of realizing, like, you know, crap, I really messed up and now I've got to take responsibility for it. Or like, wow, I'm so thankful that I have this water, because there was a time where, like, I had no money. I moved here with $80,000. Most of that was from my divorce, which I'm so grateful for. I had a friend that really helped me to view it as my healing money, which now that's what it was, and I'm so happy that I had all of that. And there's been a point where I've had $0 in my bank account, thinking like, holy crap, like, how am I gonna survive? To now my business starting to thrive and do really well, and now I'm you know, not catching up, but I'm able to live a little more comfortably without worrying about it. But
well, that's awesome. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you.
And to like repeat that, like, I think that was cool. Like, you moved here with 80 grand, which is, I think it's a lot.
I mean, that's a year's salary. I think around places like Greenville, like that's a survival.
It's a healthy salary around here. But I think, that's cool that you survive with that. Are you naturally more of an introvert or an extrovert?
You know, it's
if you were to put that label on you.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think we're a bit of both. Most of us are. And I used to consider myself a full extrovert, but I think after everything that I've gone through and really looking at some pieces of myself, I've used my extrovertedness to try and earn people's acceptance and try to earn recognition and try to earn my success. And so I've really tapped into the introverted side of myself, and I do like to keep to myself. Like I mentioned earlier, like I really like it quiet. The things that I do for myself are typically more quiet. I have,
me too.
Yeah, I have like 3-4 girlfriends here now, and like I'm not striving to like expand my network. Like I want to keep things kind of small and quiet. I like staying home. So it's funny now. I think I use my extrovert side to build relationships and carry my business and do the things I need to do on social media, you know, to promote myself. But my introvert side is getting a lot more acknowledgement. That's
cool. And I think, you know, no matter what we say or anybody says of books or podcasts or your parents, whatever it may be, like, we're speaking from our experiences, so don't feel like we're saying that you have to do this or you should do this. I like how you said that as like, this worked for me. Take some inspiration, take some of it, take all of it, take none of it, whatever. And you're probably like, like introvert, extrovert. It's probably, we use more of one in parts of our lives than the other, right? There's different phases. If someone is more of like the extrovert part of their life, or if they've only leaned heavily on the extrovert part of their life, what have you learned from truly like being by yourself? Like, were you ever afraid of being by yourself? And what have you learned? I think, so I'm naturally, thankfully, I love being by myself. Like as a kid, I would just go in my room and play with my toys by myself. But what have you learned from that?
So I know for a fact that the old Brionna used to keep my schedule busy with like activities with friends and being around other people. Now, you know, on the days that my schedule is busy, it's typically because of like clients, appointments, and like whatever my self-care is that day. Once a week I try to schedule something with like one of my friends so that I have some girl time, because I just feel like as a woman, like it's so important to like have really positive female friends. But I think, you know, what I learned over that time is, again, like there's some avoidance to like not checking in with myself and getting to know myself. So like I love, just like you mentioned, like I love quiet time. I typically, you know, even if I'm writing or doing work, don't have music or anything on, because there's something about the stillness in that. I like taking walks with my dogs, you know, that are where it's just quiet and there's no conversation. I, you know, just like you, like I love meditating. So it's funny because like quiet to me, the idea of meditation, for instance, was like, that is for wacko people and it makes no sense. Like, why would you ever just want to sit there and not think? Like, that's stupid. Like, but now it's something that I put into my everyday practice because it feels so good to learn to quiet everything. Because we are all up in our head way too much, and most of it does not serve us. And so the more that you can get into your body and really connect to that like quiet space, like you can use that as a tool when things become overwhelming, so that you don't beat yourself up or judge yourself or judge the situation. You know, you get to get still and present and stay very present, which is something that we're never taught.
That's awesome. I think, sweet, Brionna, this is awesome. For real, thank you. So another thing that when we first talked a few weeks ago, you mentioned, so the person you met, I think it was a short relationship, right, when you moved? And then you mentioned something about you were trying to save the relationship by things that you could do. You mentioned something about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, whether it's that one or my marriage or I think relationships before that, you know, something that I learned about myself was this idea of continuing to work to prove myself. And the idea that like, if I gave up or I quote unquote quit, then I didn't give it enough of a chance. And I, you know, I have clients who have that similar mentality. Like I have to keep working at it because eventually they'll see how hard I'm working and everything will transpire into this beautiful, you know, Cinderella story. But that's not how life is. And, you know, for me, in a majority of my relationships, I was always looking to prove myself by doing. And then in that, I would shut down because I wouldn't get the response that I was looking for, or I didn't get the interaction that I hoped for, and I wouldn't communicate it, and then I would internally stew and, you know, beat myself up and, you know, negatively think about that person that I was in a relationship with, only to like 5 minutes later turn around and try and do more to get them to see. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a
trust me, I know what you're saying.
I'm guilty
cycle,
of that. You know? And so, you know, I think, you know, one thing that always frustrates me that I talk to a lot of people about is I wish in school, instead of so much about economics and history and all those things that are greatly important, they also taught us about how to build healthy relationships and being emotionally intelligent and how to, you know, recognize your own patterns and, you know, why we do the things that we do. Because although I'm grateful for all the ways that I behaved in all of these relationships because they shaped who I am today, I just wish I didn't have to suffer for so long, which, you know, we create ourselves. So, you know, I mean, whether it's someone like me who's trying to prove themselves in a relationship or someone who, you know, feels a lack of connection or someone who feels like they're never going to find somebody because they feel so lonely, it all stems from how you view your own level of worthiness, enoughness, value, and importance. So
yeah, I can attest to that. Like I've again, going back to like how I thought I really knew myself, and then I got into a quick relationship as soon as I got here that I didn't expect, and like that really has exposed so much insecurity that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I agree.
Unlike, because I thought like, because before like leaving relationships, I was fine. I was like usually the one breaking up. I was like, I'm strong, whatever, things are fine. And then this truly, like I truly cared about this person so much, and like when that, like it wasn't ugly by any means. It's still like great, but when it didn't work out of my expectation or what I thought it was going to, like truly, it just like flipped me upside down. But then like that's why I know why I moved here. Is one of the reasons why I moved here, and that's like so important. Like,
yeah,
just being by yourself and just like.
Well, and I think looking at the bigger picture, like you said, I mean, if I hadn't had met this person and moved out here, I would have for sure not learned as much about myself as I did.
Yep.
I wouldn't have created the career that I have now that is so much more flexible and dynamic in what I'm doing. I wouldn't have the relationship that I currently have right now, with my boyfriend, that I'm, super blessed to have. And I wouldn't have the boundaries with like time and relationships and with myself that I do. I mentioned to you earlier about the way that I use the gym. I stopped going for like 3 months, and I found myself unhappy because obviously I need movement and I crave it, and I like challenging myself. And I got into yoga, and that really enhanced my I don't even know what you want to call it, like my internal relationship between how I feel and how I move my body and like how I view myself, And I don't think everybody has to do yoga. And I mean, there's certain things that I do here that I love that I think everybody should do, like float at Drift, which is awesome,
Which is sensory deprivation, like a float tank. I've done that twice. The first time I did it, trippy, whoa.
Yeah.
Like the first 30 minutes, so when I did it, I'm not sure if this was a good or bad time to do it as far as my mental space. It was when I was like, it was recently, like that relationship was in like turmoil or whatever. And so like I was super anxious already. And so like the first 30 minutes were basically hell.
Yeah, yep.
Because it's dark, I can't hear anything. It's just, I'm like.
You're by yourself. You're
I
forced
can't
to
move,
be by yourself.
you can't feel a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just my thoughts. I was like, why am I doing this? Should I quit? Should I leave? Should I leave? But I didn't. And eventually, probably around the 40-minute mark out of 60 minutes, I hit a point where I did not feel a thing. Like literally, it was so cool, like where I got into this meditative space of literally, you don't feel heat, like cold, pressure. Like, because usually even when you meditate, like you can feel your butt on the ground, but this is just nothingness. And it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that hasn't done it, please contact me because I can set you up with a free float your first time.
Yeah, by the way, so where can people find you on Instagram or social?
So both is Brionna, Brionna, and my last name is Morse, Morse, and it's on Instagram and on Facebook. So yeah, please get in touch with me because I would love to help you experience it. And just like you, like the first time I went, I was actually in Savannah, Georgia, and they actually have like one of those, I feel like it's like a Tomb Raider, like that's how I consider it. It's like a big metal, you have a door that you walk into like you're going into a gas chamber to die. It was like very overwhelming. But that time was great because I mean, it was the first time I'd ever done it, and I felt so relaxed. But I've had crazy visions. Like one time I saw myself digging a grave for myself. This happened like a year ago. It was my birthday last year. And what I took away from it was almost like I was digging a hole to bury the old me, because it was like this, I was starting to have this rebirth, which felt very true at the time. But like another time, I had this vision of like my ankles breaking.
Ugh.
But as I look on it, it was like I was feeling super like ungrounded and not stable because things were just kind of all over the place for me, and I was not feeling very connected to myself. So, I mean, I just, other times I fall completely asleep. Other times, like you, I can't relax. But I think all of that is such great information. A lot of us move so quickly through our life that we forget to check in, and see where we're at, where our thoughts are at, where our feelings are at, where our body's at. We just don't know ourselves enough. And so going to something like that forces you to be with you.
I love this. So the theme kind of this conversation is almost stop doing.
Yeah.
And like be still, be silent, be with yourself, and check in with yourself. Why is that so important?
Well, I mean, the underlying theme and something that I work with all my clients on is this idea of self-love. You may be able to have a successful career or a successful relationship or a successful spiritual practice, but somewhere along the lines, that person is going to notice that something is off. And they can't put their finger on it, so they just put more into the relationship or more into the career. But the problem with that is what ends up happening is something ends up falling apart, and then it feels like life is over. But when you can come from a place of being in a solid relationship with yourself, which means you understand your thoughts, you understand your triggers, you understand what your emotions communicate to you, you understand your body. Like, we don't even listen to our body half the time. Somebody says like, oh, I've got, the stomach ache, or I've got this going on, I don't feel good, I'm sick. And it's like, okay, well, let's like trace your steps back. What did you eat that day? How did you sleep? How much water did you have? Like, all of those things are just a communication. Our thoughts are a communication to ourselves, our emotions are a communication to ourselves, and our body signals are communication, systems too. And we just don't pause enough to check in and see what we need. We tend to put it on external factors.
That's interesting. I like that. So instead of waiting for something to kind of blow up, it's kind of like the frequent check-in is essentially preventing that. Checking in are those mini, like discovering yourself more, or just learning about yourself, like listening to that communication instead of you're being forced. Interesting. That is fascinating. So what is one thing, like right now, it sounds like you're pretty aligned.
I hope.
I
mean, I'm closer and closer every day. I
right,
feel
and it's always like a process of learning.
Yeah.
But what's one thing that you're still, like, what's a current challenge, like right now in your life?
Well, I mean, for me, when I find myself stuck or out of alignment, it typically goes back to a belief about not being enough. And somehow if I trace back what's happening, somehow it's like there's this fear around something not working because I'm not doing enough of something. And so I constantly have to have that conversation with myself around, no, but you are, like, you're doing your daily actions, you're doing your, the commitments that you have, we all have this way of like wanting to be more for ourselves, for other people. And, whether it's a worthiness or an enoughness or, those two typically tend to be our foundation, if you would say, for why we end up doing the things that we do. So I'm constantly going back to that. And it's okay. That's awesome. I think that's the thing, is it's okay. The difference between the Brionna now and the Brionna a year ago is I would respond to that enoughness in some sort of maladaptive or poor way to reinforce that I'm not enough. Now, if it pops up for me, I just have to check in with myself, and I kind of know the feelings that come up, and I kind of know the thoughts, and I have that conversation with my internal dialogue around like, no, but you are doing the work, and you are being consistent. And I still say it out loud. Like, I'll say it to, my boyfriend, like, I haven't gotten any clients this week. Like, I just feel like I need to do more. And, like, there's a positive coaching from his side. Like, you are doing as much as you can. Like, you can't do any more than you can do, you know? So that's where I constantly have to check back in with myself and get realigned.
Yeah, this is awesome. Like, it's funny. I'm definitely gonna have to talk to you more about this. Like, I'm connecting with a lot of what you're saying. Like, we're similar in that, and other people listening or watching, but like achievers and doers. This is the downside of what we do, right? Like, we love to do things and achieve things and check things off and accomplish goals. But like literally yesterday in like meditation, like I kind of woke up not way anxious, but a little anxious. But then I literally went, like, what I do a lot is go back and say, no, Ben, you are doing enough. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like, you did this and this. Like, yeah, you're keeping this thing. Like, you did a lot. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're doing enough.
Yeah.
You were dope. Like, keep going.
No, for sure. I mean, I completely agree. Well, and what's interesting too is, I mean, I'm 10 years older than you are, which, I mean, isn't a significant difference. But I think your age to about that, like, 22, 20, like, you're in that, like, Gary V mentality. Where
I was listening to him this morning with Aubrey, actually.
He's great. He's and he's super successful. So obviously he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But we forget that the Gary V's and the Rocks and, you know, the
Uber,
like, Will Smiths of the world
those are good
also
comparisons.
stop and don't do anything. They just don't talk about that piece because that's not where their success is built off of.
Yeah.
You know, but they do take time to be with their family, and they do take time to pause and put their phone away. They just don't talk about that stuff because that's not where their business is coming from, which is okay. But what happens is we get fixated on wanting to be
that's
like
their entire
the doers.
life.
Yeah, and we want to be like them. Like, we strive for that level of success, which again is fine, but you have to know that, like, in any form, you cannot be successful by always just doing. Like, you have to stop and refill yourself. And that comes from journaling and meditation and some sort of physical movement and eating healthy foods and spending quality time with, you know, friendships that fill you up and not, you know, suffocate you. So, you know, I mean, that's like a huge piece.
Yeah. So I'll have to send you this interview that Gary did. Do you know Aubrey Marcus?
Yeah, I've listened to that one.
The one, I think it just came out like yesterday.
Yeah.
You listened to it already?
Uh-huh.
Dang, okay. So you're on top of your game.
Remember, I've got a 30-minute drive into town every day.
Okay, I love it. So what'd you think about it? Because it really was about, he's really changing his narrative because he realizes the negative effect that his hustle and grind, like,
the idea, it's great. I've had this conversation with a friend of mine several times, and she and I obviously kind of align in this way that, you know, the idea of hustling is, again, in my opinion, like a proof. Like, you have to work hard in order to show for something.
Yep.
When in fact, you can work and show for something without giving up your integrity and your, like, level of, you know, physical health and wellness.
Yeah.
And so I love that he's starting to see things differently because obviously he's influential enough to really create this tone one way or the other. And what's great is like to pair him with Aubrey, who I think is the exact opposite, is great because there is a balance there. And I think that that's what's hard is, like, we're a human species that finds a way to gravitate towards one side or the other. It's like we win or we lose. We quit or we keep going. And there is actually this whole other gray area where it's like, well, you can actually stop for a second, take a break, and continue on. That's not considered quitting.
I love that.
But you also haven't stopped and given up on yourself. But it's like so polarized. Like, we live in this very polarized mentality.
Hold on. I think we got to repeat this one too. So it's not like quit or give up or win or keep going.
Win or lose.
Or win or lose.
Yeah.
There's so many degrees and variances, like, within that. And do you think it's that? Is it just I think it's easier for the human mind to try and black and white and label things.
Yeah.
It's more difficult to live in the gray. Is that why?
Well, because to me, gray doesn't have anything to show for it. Both opposites have some sort of outside, either observed change or stuckness, like where you're staying the same and not doing anything, or there's like proof of something monetary or physical versus not having anything. And so being in that gray area, like, there's nothing to show, And that's what I think we've always been taught, is like there has to be something given or received or shown in order to prove, quote unquote, going back to what we talked about before, that you're doing something.
That's cool. And again, like what you said before, remind me, so you can still like take a break.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily like you're not quitting or giving up.
No. Okay, prime example. So this morning I took a sculpt class at yoga. So it's like a, HIIT class with light weights where you're just moving the entire time. Typically, like, I'm going the whole time. I use the heaviest weights until my arms start to die, and then I'll pick up the next weight, and I just keep going and going and going. Today, holy crap, like I had to step out and buy a protein bar and eat it halfway through the thing because I thought I was going to pass out, which never happens. And I was just like physically exhausted. And I started to notice in my head being like, what the hell is your problem, Brionna?
Probably,
like, this is not you. Like everybody's looking at you like you're a quitter and a loser. And, like you need to keep pushing. You need to keep pushing. And so I'm in the tabletop position, and we're doing these like donkey kick things with weights in between our legs. And finally I just stop and I'm like, you know what? It's okay to not do it. Like you don't have to push. And you're listening to yourself. And right now, the self that is here today is saying, I can't go as hard as I'm used to going. So just let me be where I'm at. And I did, and I, finished the class, and I felt good about how I chose to engage with myself in that moment. And oftentimes you can take that experience and put it into all these other areas, relationships, the way that you push for work, or, studying for tests or whatever it may be. Because we want to, like, we have these judgmental thoughts that pop into our head that, force us to, you use the word hustle harder to get somewhere. And it's like, you can only go so far. So
I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And then, I joked around with the teacher afterwards, like, holy cat, I was dying today. Like, I don't know what happened, but I do. I mean, I'm, it's funny. This whole thing about age, which I've never really kept track of. I don't feel like I'm going to be 37 here soon. I don't feel like I'm 37. I know for the most part I don't look it. But like I'm having these body changes happening where I'm like, what's wrong with me? That's the first thought. Something's wrong with me, So I've been having to take these antibiotics for this thing happening with my face. And for a fact I know, because I haven't taken a medication for like 7 years. Like I haven't been sick. I don't, even take headache medicine most of the time. Like I don't take anything.
And you only drink water, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, and I only drink water, or sparkling water. But, our body responds to inanimate objects that it's not used to. So I'm 100% clear that has something to do with it, because it's a foreign object that's typically not in my system, And so again, like it's really about connecting to, oh, that's right, Brionna, nothing's wrong with you. Like your body's just kind of going through a change right now. So with that, you get to slow down and let the change happen.
I love that too.
Not forcing it to stay the same, whatever that is.
Dang. Okay. All right. So we've come to the portion in the podcast where I call it Scroll My Soul.
Okay.
And so what that means, okay.
I like that. Scroll my soul.
Scroll my soul.
Okay.
So what that means is I keep a running list of notes, right? Whether it's from conversations, podcasts, books, whatever, of things I like. And so I literally scroll. So that's what I was kind of doing earlier. I was scrolling to kind of pick a thought.
Okay.
And I randomly stop, and then I feel like it's meant to be. So I ask how you resonate with it, reflect on it, whatever it means to you. Cool?
Got it.
I think, and this one is perfect. It's kind of what we've already talked about. Sometimes we need to go through the worst to become our best. So sometimes we need to go through our worst to become our best.
So what does that mean to me?
Yes.
My life? No, I'm just kidding.
Right now?
Yeah.
Damn, Ben, this podcast is
I know.
the worst.
No, it's great. I mean, to me, what that says is that in order to be better, because I think achieving our best or having that perfectionistic idea that like one day everything is going to align and life is going to be perfect is bullcrap. But becoming better every day only happens when you let go of those things that no longer serve you and have been keeping you stuck. And whether you want to consider that the worst or not, in my eyes, how I view it is, in order to be better, you do have to like acknowledge those parts of you that are ugly and gross and, you know, have kept you where you're at. And, you know, for me, that was a huge wake-up call, you know, that jealousy exists in me, that dishonesty exists in me, that shame and pride exist in me, because having too much pride can also be very ugly. And those things set you up to have these experiences throughout your life that end up inevitably not working for you. And so you have to look at, like, what do I need to do to acknowledge those quote unquote worst parts of you? In the therapy world, we call it the shadow. And know that they're there, because they are always going to be there, but that they don't have to have as much of a pull and control over how you respond and react to your things, which then leads you to becoming better, because that awareness piece is so huge.
That is, I've recently had a conversation about that too, of just like, it's important. I've gone through that recently of, I don't even want to call them weaknesses. I would just say another side of our experience or personality. To not judge it, because part of like doing, I'd only like to do things that were labeled as, or that I defined as like good or positive. But I really do have those feelings that society deems as bad or whatever. Right. So to not judge it and to almost embrace it. And earlier you were talking about compassion, having compassion for yourself. Well, it's like loving yourself, like, you know, for those things.
Yeah, well, and I mean, those things, again, like going back to how we started this, like those things served you in some way. And whether they led to a positive outcome or a negative outcome, they did something for you at that time, which means they exist in you. And so with awareness comes the idea that, like, okay, this part of me exists because there was a time when I used to use it in some way, like it reinforced a behavior for me, whether the outcome was good or bad, like you did it. That's reinforcing. But that being more aware, you can look at the next time I am in a similar situation or experiencing a same feeling, does that dishonest or prideful or jealous side of me come out? Or do I get to choose that higher, truer self of me that gets to be compassionate or honest or, you know, patient, and say exactly what's so, and just let the outcome speak for itself, knowing that, like, wow, I showed up for this this best part of me, instead of going back to that worst, shameful, yucky place.
Yeah, I like that. Well, dang. Before we wrap it up, do you have like anything that's on your mind right now that you feel compelled to tell the world?
You know, I mean, the one theme that I see, especially currently in the group of, you know, I work mostly with women. I have male clients that come in every so often, but it's a majority women, is, you know, this idea around having to show up and be more for everyone else, that they lose a side of themselves. And, you know, the thought that always pops up for me is for all of us to find a balance of, you know, giving and nurturing our own needs and giving and nurturing the needs of others, and like creating a balance there, that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, you know, going back to that gray. So, you know, my thought or encouragement to listeners that are male and female is to, you know, just make sure that all of your eggs are not in the basket of doing for others, that you are taking time to do for yourself, because, you know, that level of giving and grace that you do for you only gives you more to then be able to give to others. You know, I was told years ago, you know, you have to make sure that you're at 100% before you can give to anyone else, because if you're, you know, relating as a parent or a boyfriend or girlfriend or, you know, a boss to your employees, functioning at 50%, you're not giving them your best self. And so to really look at like, how can I make sure I'm at 100 so that when I give, I only go down to 75. That's an easy fill versus like starting at 50, getting depleted down to 10. And now you're like, angry and lashing out at people or shutting down and avoiding things, or, you know what I mean? Like cutting people out when you really don't need to. So just that awareness.
Like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So if people want to work with you, where do they go?
They can go over to my website, which is www.theradfrontier.com. That's my business logo, I guess I like to call it, or my motto, the Rad Frontier. And there's a client form on there that they can fill out to submit to me, and then I'll get back to them and we'll get on the phone. And I love, honestly, like, if someone is interested in working with me, I love to just have a quick chat and get to know you, and where your struggles are, and I share with you how I work, and I want to provide you with some initial just something yummy to take with you, whether we end up working with each other or not, because again, like, it all goes back to my gift and my purpose. Like, I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So
one last thought from me, if whether it's you or someone else, like, I think therapy or coaching, sometimes it goes back to the judgment, like, I'm not doing enough. Why do I need someone else to help me? So if someone's feeling that right now, like, ooh, I really want to reach out to Brionna or someone else, but I feel guilty or like I'm judging myself, what would you say?
Well, it's a twofold. So, right, this is coming from a therapist and now a coach. So, therapy and coaching are a little bit different. Based on what I know of myself. It's funny, the idea of therapy is something's wrong with me, and the idea of coaching is like I'm trying to improve myself, which is hilarious because self-improvement happens and everything is wrong with all of us. Like, not one person doesn't have something going on that could be addressed and fixed. So let's get honest with ourselves there first. And, for anyone that's considering it but afraid of personal judgments or judgments from others, I feel like we're actually in this current time frame where more people are asking for help and wanting to grow personally and professionally, and so the stigma, I think, is starting to lose.
I would agree.
It's like negativity, but I would say just reach out and see what happens.
Give it a try.
Like, here's the deal, like, even the idea of reaching out and asking for help, like, pat yourself on the back. Because even just asking for it is so hard. It is so hard because it means that we've got something that we have to work on.
Ooh, actually, you just gave me a good idea. So we do weekly challenges, and this week's challenge actually might be to ask for help.
I like that. And I think you could do it like with a friend, a coach, a mentor, somebody that you see at the gym all the time that maybe like you want to lift like them but you don't. For me it might be like a yoga class, like, can you help align me a little bit more because I just want to learn this pose a little bit better. But I mean, I think the idea of asking for help is great. And the thing about it is instead of looking at the fear or the discomfort around the idea that like doing this may mean, quote unquote, something's wrong, I encourage people to flip the script and look at, wow, by asking for this, I get to find more fulfillment. I get to feel more happy. I get to seek more enjoyment in my life. Like, there's so much more positive, places of gratitude to sit in finding help and, working on yourself than there is the fear of judgment and something not working.
Well, this has been awesome. Brionna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For real, this was really good. I resonated with a lot. I'm sure other people will too.
Good, thank you.
I'm excited to listen back to see, just so I can reflect even more.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't do too many ums or you knows or ands. Those are typically my three stuck word conjunctions.
It's all good. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Adios. I hope you all enjoyed and loved that interview just as much as I did. And this week's challenge is inspired by Brianna's company, the Rad Frontier. Our challenge this week is to ask for help. It could be from a coach, a therapist, a partner, friend, someone at the gym to help you with a specific lift or workout routine, or someone at yoga to help with a pose. I get it. Asking for help is hard. It means we have something to work on, just like Brionna just said, right? It's a state of extreme vulnerability. Instead of looking at it like something is wrong with me, flip the script, flip it in your mind and say, by asking for this, I get to experience more joy. I get to experience more gratitude, more fulfillment. That is an awesome mindset, right? Like, we think we're damaged that we need to ask for help, but no, man, we're gonna like get more fulfillment and joy from that. Just, I'm stoked for this challenge. So there are a few ways you can report back once you complete it. You can post on Facebook or Instagram using hashtag GoalLinkChallenge, tag us in your stories, or use the GoalLink hotline. This hotline is designed for those who want to remain anonymous or you don't have social media, but you still want that form of accountability. So to use the hotline, call 385-626-0525. Follow the instructions in the voicemail that you hear and let it rip. Thank you so much all for listening. For real, I appreciate you. I love you. I hope you come back next week. I hope you're doing these challenges. I hope you're discovering more about yourself and delving deep in like what brings you more happiness, learning more. Man, I just love you all. Have an amazing week. This is The GoalLink Show.